Legends Hollow Hero. The Hollow Hero is a third-person action-adventure game where you play as our, feisty protagonist, a combat wombat called Brunt. And she's making her way through a beautiful, lush world of Eridol to try and discover a secret that the player will discover as they proceed through the game. The running joke that we have in our community is God of Wombat. So if you're a fan of God of War, which we're heavily inspired by, but you like the idea of playing as like a fluffy marsupial, then definitely a game that will definitely appeal to you, for sure. So Primordials Legends are legends about basically godlike entities that exist within our universe, which are called Primordials. There's hints to them and their powers and what they mean for the world scattered everywhere throughout our environments and stuff like that. And we leave that up to the player to start to determine their importance within the bigger picture, I suppose. Within that bigger picture as well, there's also other creatures that are like, obviously, I guess you could call them demigods, like demi-primordials and stuff and things like that, and the fight for power within the universe and what that means and stuff like that. And then you bring that down to Brunt and her story and the realization that like she's leaving the Hollow, which is like her adoptive homeland, and she's traveling out into the world for the first time in a world that is much bigger than anything she's like ever seen, right? And how does she like navigate that? And the fact that like, you know, for her at her core, the only thing that matters is like saving a bunch of people from her community, her adoptive community, making sure that she saves a bunch of them from an imposing threat, right? Which is the wasps and what they want and stuff like that. When there's a much larger overarching narrative that is occurring, and that sort of gets revealed in the opening and closing cutscenes of the game. Anyone who's played it at PAX has probably seen that sort of 2D illustration-y thing that we have with like this mysterious stranger, and that's all alluding to a much larger universe and things that are trying to be told, and also sort of generally indicating to Brunt's importance within the universe's story as well. Throughout the world, you'll find like a crystal that's like a very pretty pink crystal that you see everywhere. And the more you start to sort of observe the environmental storytelling, you start to realize how important that is. And then the fact that Brunt can kind of cover herself in like a crystal armor made out of that. It's not something that we inherently explain straight away, but it is something that she can innately do. And why is that? And then how does that sort of branch into more important parts of the story? So yeah. So for me, wombat's one of my favorite animals, if not my favorite animal. So it made a lot of sense that we as a team wanted to do something cool like that. We're an Aussie team as well, so it seemed like a fun idea to have an Aussie character. I mean, you've got famous mascots like Crash Bandicoot, for example, or Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. Maybe one day Brunt will fall into that echelon of characters as well, which would be really awesome. But we really just knew as a team that we wanted to make something really cool for us that we were passionate about. I guess a little bit of background on the team is necessary to get to that point, but we all met during university. This is over a decade ago now. We have a giant wombat that goes around fighting giant wasps, and it's very easy for that to get into the kind of silly, almost macabre sometimes vibe of things, and it can be just kind of ridiculous. And people, rightfully so, when they first hear about the concept, might think of things like Banjo-Kazooie, for example. And in regards to some of our like platforming systems, we have been inspired by a lot of that stuff. There's sometimes a subtle expectation that it's kind of going to be the butt of the joke, if that makes a little sense. Like that Australian humor vibe, which is like, like we take nothing seriously, everything's for a laugh sort of thing. And while there is humor in our game, we are taking it seriously. Like, you know, when people ask us, well, why is it Primordials Legends Hollow Hero? We're like, well, it's in the same vein as the Elder Scrolls Skyrim. So we have a universe and we're telling a story within that universe, and it's this thing that we're trying to build up. And yes, Brunt is a wombat, and yes, she is voiced by an Australian voice actress who is taking the role very seriously, but she gets to use her normal Australian accent and stuff like that. As far as Brunt is concerned, as a character, she is just a character that exists in this universe. She's not a joke or anything like that. Like, she's a serious character that happens to be able to do a ton of really cool, super-powered moves, like burrow underground and then do like a Shoryuken uppercut out of the ground and all of these other sort of things. And then, you know, a little bit of the humor coming through, like wombats are known for like killing predators by crushing them with their butts inside burrows. So we've introduced like a butt slam attack and stuff like that. So like the humor shines through, but there is always that sense of like seriousness to the world, right? It's like, yeah, we're trying to tell like a really cool fantasy story. And I think that's what I like best about it, is how we've struck that balance between cute, quirky Australian character that still has a sense of seriousness and really reflects again on those kind of games that me and my team want to make. I guess a little bit of background on the team is necessary to get to that point, but we all met during university. This is over a decade ago now. And we were, working through and got to our final game project, which was a non-lethal first-person shooter. It was basically, the idea was Toy Story, but with like Nerf guns was the idea that we had at the time. Called Toy Box, which has coincidentally ended up being the name of our company, which is Toy Box Game Studio. So we stuck together all that time, which is really cool. But before we kind of formed the company and before we decided to really hammer down into the idea of making a game together, we kind of gone our separate ways a little bit. Myself and a couple of the others had gone into education. I went and did my master's degree, and then went and did a few other things like little mobile game projects here. And all of that stuff was really cool, but we kind of came together as mates, and we were just chatting. I can't even remember exactly why we were together, but we were having a conversation, and we kind of all came to the conclusion that the work that we were doing wasn't why we wanted to become game developers. The thing that made us passionate, right? We're in no way saying that there's a particular kind of game that's better than another. More so just there was a particular kind of game that we enjoyed playing, and it's the kind of stuff that we want to make. And it's hard to be passionate, especially in such a creative industry, when you're not necessarily working on the things that you'd like to be working on. We found the best way to remedy that while we weren't working on that kind of stuff was to perhaps do that ourselves. So we went off and we started concepting ideas, and we originally had a project called Fireborn, or Primordials Fireborn, which was sort of like an early concept stage to try and figure out what the universe might be for Hollow Hero, etc. In classic first team sort of way, we bit off way more than we could chew. And we knew that like after a while pretty quickly that we're like, all right, we're gonna have to hone this in. But it was fine because we'd learnt lots. I'd gone off, and as part of my professional career, I'd worked on a bunch of different stuff like Fortnite, Star Wars. I've worked with SpongeBob, a bunch of like different really cool IPs that got me a lot of experience working in like more professional AAA scenarios and stuff like that with larger teams. And I was able to bring that back, and other members of the team have done other things and working for other game studios were able to bring back their knowledge. And collectively, we then were like, well, Fireborn's obscene. There's absolutely no way we're going to be able to produce this with zero money as a team of 7 people working in our spare time. But perhaps if we scope it back, we can. And Brunt at the time was always a character in our universe. She wasn't the main character, but she was a character in our universe. And I was like, well, I love wombats, and I think she's really, really cool and currently underutilized. I think an origin story for her is actually super interesting. And it turned out to be a super happy accident and really effective, because as it turns out, Combat Wombat is a fantastic marketing hook. And it was really good when on Twitter and stuff like that to sort of draw people in and be like, okay, cool. I don't even really care what the game is, just that concept alone is awesome. And then after that, the production value, etc., kind of spoke for itself. So yeah, that was kind of the origins that led to the idea for this game. I mean, obviously there's all that build up to us getting to that point, but the actual development journey of working on the game itself has been remarkably stressful. It's been really good, but there's a natural element that comes to it when you're working on a product in a non-full-time capacity. So this project is very, very much a passion project. We haven't received a cent of funding from screen agencies or anything. No publisher support, anything like that. Like, this is purely just off of our own backs, and we work on it in our spare time. So the amount of development time's actually been very small comparatively, but yeah, the amount of work we've been putting in has been like extreme, because working full time and then going into this passion project, as much as we don't like the idea of crunch, the second we do a second on this passion project, we're crunching because we're working beyond relative hours, right? To add on top of all of that as well, we just gotten to the point where we're like, okay, cool, we're going to downscope and we're going to get started on Hollow Hero and start developing this project. And then like not even 2 months later, the Ruby Princess rocks up to Sydney and the entire COVID pandemic spreads across Australia. So we all go into lockdown, and yeah, it was pretty hectic for those first couple of years as well. And it was also, in many ways, a bit tough because while we were doing our own stuff and things like that, people that we knew and like family members and stuff were like, "Oh, we saw you were working on this game. It was making some great progress. Like, what's happened to it?" And we're like, "It exists, but different," and stuff like that. And it's really hard to explain without something tangible. But then, yeah, 2 years ago now, we were able to do sort of that first announcement of Hollow Hero, and Brunt as our main protagonist and stuff like that. And we were going for like a really high quality, graphics bar, etc., using Unreal Engine 5, stuff like that. And there was a ton of really exciting things for us to talk about that we were able to use as leverage to kind of, I guess, build our own spirits. At the end of the day, we're beholden to no one. We don't have time contracts, so the game comes out when we're ready, and we don't have to pay each other. We kind of just respect and trust each other, and so it's that kind of like mutual understanding and stuff like that that's important for us to keep gelling together well as a team. And then we get to make things that we're really passionate about. And I think even through looking at like our most recent showcases at PAX Australia and Tokyo Game Show, which we were invited to this year, which was really exciting. It's an excellent, I guess, feedback loop, showing that all of the passion and hard work that we're putting into the project is being seen by our community and players, and then being given back to us. And they're like, "Yeah, you guys are cooking. This is awesome. Like, keep doing your thing. We're super excited to play it." And then that naturally helps build our morale. And then that way we can keep working on a project, which ultimately is just blood, sweat, and tears. Like, that's what it's built out of, right? So we know after PAX, the main bit of feedback we were getting, which I would argue is good feedback, is when's it coming out? Like, it's obviously ready. When's it coming out? And I'm like, it's obviously ready based on this very precise vertical slice that I've provided to you that is meant to not have any problems with it whatsoever. But in a lot of ways, we know what the game is meant to be. We can see the picture. We just kind of need to put the pieces in the correct spot and kind of just push it to the finish line. We have a sort of an internal mantra that we will not provide a release date until we know when that release date is going to be. Again, we aren't beholden to anyone, so it's on our time. It's when we want to get it out there. But at the same time, we don't want to be stupid and we don't want to work on something forever. We want to get this game out to people as soon as possible. It's not like the final stretch, but it's definitely like thinking about that finish line now, which is like, we have everything we need to go. So now we should just knuckle down and get that stuff done. And next steps for us is the final step, I guess I'd argue, is like we need to get it over the line, get the game finished, etc., and get it into people's hands. Irrelevant of whether this game is like a massive financial success or not, it is going to be successful for us based on what our measurements of success were, which was to make a game that we were proud of, that is ultimately something that we wanted to work on. And like, no matter what, as much as we hope that it does well and that people love it and we can use that as a stepping stone into expanding a universe, because like, our universe, even though it's Brunt's story, there's stuff hidden within our game world that expands on like 150,000 years of like established lore. Like, it's ludicrous amount of work that's gone into like the underbones of this world, right? And for players that are interested in exploring that stuff, they can find that stuff. And we want that community to build and be like, well, what's happening next? Like, what are the Primordials? What's going on? Why are these ruins here, etc.? And then if that works out, then awesome. But more than anything else, we can't think about that until the game is finished and in players' hands. So that's the next step for us for sure.
What is your go-to caffeinated beverage for working on the game?
So my teammates are going to kill me. I don't drink coffee and I don't drink tea. I despise the stuff, actually. So I will say on behalf of them, especially since we're a Melbourne-based team, obviously coffee is very important. But if I really need to, I'll just do energy drinks. I love like the Monster Rosa.